Imagine two leaders. Okay. Both aiming for the same goal, similar situations, but their methods, worlds apart. One jumps in, builds, directs, provides everything.
Yeah.
The other steps back, empowers, lets things grow from the ground up. Today we're diving into a fascinating real-life story with exactly that kind of contrast. And it holds some, well, pretty surprising lessons about ownership, sustainability, and maybe what progress really looks like.
And what's great is we have actual historical records here. We're looking at two different approaches to missionary work, community building. It's not just theory, it's documented.
Exactly. So we've got these accounts, right? Two missionaries, different areas. The first one, let's call him Missionary 1, seems like a good man, working in a pretty large district. He's very hands-on.
Right, building schools, churches, constantly looking for outside funding, keeping a really tight grip on things. It's sort of a composite picture, but based on real examples.
And then Missionary 2, smaller district, but his approach is, well, radical for the time. He actually refuses mission funds much of the time.
Yeah, pushes the local community to figure out their own needs, solve their own problems.
Yeah.
Treats the local church like it's its own entity, really. And this one, we have his actual diary.
Wow. So our mission today for this deep dive is to really get into these two philosophies. What were they thinking? What happened right away? And what were the long-term effects?
And hopefully pull out some insights that are relevant no matter what you're doing, leading a team, involved in your community, whatever. It's about effective leadership, sustainable growth.
Okay, let's jump in. Missionary 1, the builder, the director. What did he do first?
Well, Missionary 1, in his large district, he saw a need. He believed his converts, to really grow in their faith. They needed education. They needed proper places to worship.
Makes sense. Seems like a genuine motivation, wanting to help them develop spiritually.
Absolutely. And he didn't just think about it, he acted. Started building schools, churches, and funding them. He went all out. Appealing to societies back in England, writing to friends, drumming up support, but also encouraging the locals to pitch in money, labor, whatever they could offer. He was definitely proactive.
And the results must have looked good initially.
Oh, yeah. Very impressive on the surface. Schools went up, churches were built. Some even got, bells and pump organs. Pretty fancy for the context.
Yeah.
They had robed choirs, altar linens sent over from England. Apparently, visitors from England were quite impressed with the services.
You can just picture it, can't you? These solid buildings, everything looking orderly, very proper. But
yeah,
it's always a but, isn't there? What happened next?
Well, here's the thing. Despite all that initial success, that flurry of activity, things started to slip when his direct supervision wasn't constant. Buildings fell into disrepair, those nice robes, the altar frontals, they got neglected, the initial shine, it started to wear off.
That really says something, doesn't it, about development that's mostly driven from the outside. Looks great at first, but if there's no local buy-in.
Precisely. That sense of ownership, that responsibility, it just wasn't there yet. It wasn't their job to keep it up in their minds.
And it wasn't just the buildings, right? I think I read something about the services too.
Yeah, that's another interesting point. Sometimes the locals actually preferred their own more informal native hymns to the formal services or the translated English ones he'd introduced.
So a bit of a cultural disconnect there, maybe, between what was provided and what actually resonated locally.
It certainly seems that way. It kind of raises the question of whose idea of proper worship was being prioritized, Was it fitting their spiritual expression or imposing something else?
Right. So Missionary 1 sees this lack of initiative, things falling apart a bit.
Yeah.
What's his next move?
He decides to set up native church councils. The idea, presumably, was to get people more involved, encourage some self-management.
Okay, that sounds like a step towards empowerment. Did it work?
Well, the intention was probably good, but the initial reaction, it tells you a lot about that top-down model. The local pastors, the people themselves, they were mostly just confused.
Confused how?
They seemed to think it was just another way to get money from the mission, not really about taking charge themselves.
There's that quote, isn't there? From one of the pastors.
Yes, it's very revealing. He said, the people come to us and they say, what does this mean? We do not want to be consulted. The missionaries are our father and our mother. Let the missionary tell us what to do, and we will do it.
Wow. Father and mother. That really shows how dependent they'd become.
Yeah.
Or how they saw the relationship anyway.
It starkly highlights that difficulty, doesn't it? Trying to cultivate initiative when people are just used to being directed. They didn't feel equipped or maybe confident enough to actually own those decisions.
But did the councils achieve anything over time? Did that change?
To some extent, yes. Apparently, people started to find being consulted. Well, interesting. It gave them a bit of a sense of importance, and they did learn to manage some funds.
Okay, so some progress.
Some, yeah. But always, always under the missionary's careful watch. Strict auditing, his approval needed. It was more like supervised administration than real autonomy.
And the missionary himself was quite open about that, wasn't he? He didn't think they were ready.
Not at all. He explicitly said something like, if they did what they liked, what should I do if they wanted to do something of which I did not approve? I must keep the direction of affairs in my own hands. That's a direct quote.
Tells you everything, really, that need for control.
Absolutely. It's that paternalistic mindset, however well-meaning. He just couldn't let go because what if they made a choice he didn't like? And that fundamentally capped their ability to truly own their church.
And he had support for this.
Yeah.
Even from some locals.
Interestingly, yes. Some native pastors who were financially independent of their congregations actually supported his control, which probably reinforced his position.
And there was that specific example, wasn't there, with the teacher?
Oh, right. That's a very clear illustration. The local pastorate committee, the council, they decided against appointing a special teacher for the children. They even refused to allocate funds.
Okay.
Their decision.
You'd think. But Missionary 1 just pushed it through anyway, overrode their decision completely, and then when they tried to withhold the money, he just paid the teacher himself out of the Central Church Fund.
So much for the council's authority.
Exactly. It sends a very clear message, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Your input is noted, but ultimately my judgment prevails. Undermines the whole process.
And his approach to discipline. Similar pattern.
Pretty much. He set up committees, for inquiries into moral issues. But he expressed disappointment that decisions weren't consistently applied when he wasn't around.
Like what?
Like Christians would welcome back people who'd been excommunicated while he was away. It showed they hadn't really bought into the process or the decisions as their own.
Mm-hmm. They were just following rules when the rule maker was watching. Seems like it. And his comment, again, very telling. It would be dreadful if the Native Committee condoned a moral offense. It shows his underlying lack of trust in their judgment.
And this need for control, it seems like it followed him even when he got promoted, right? To the diocesan conference.
Yeah, he became secretary. But his language skills weren't great, so what happened? They actually bent the conference rules to accommodate him.
How?
Conducted most of the business in English rather than the local language, which, again, might seem helpful, but it keeps the power dynamic tilted towards the outsider. It potentially sidelines local leaders who aren't fluent in English.
Right. And that final story about him at the conference. The building.
Ah, yes. That really sums it all up. Someone local proposed converting an old missionary house into a secondary school for local kids. A reasonable idea, you might think.
Seems practical.
His reaction, immediate shutdown. He just bluntly said, well, anyhow, it is our building, it is not your building, and we will not let you have it for that purpose.
Oof. No ambiguity there.
None at all. It just lays bare that fundamental belief. Ultimately, the mission, he held the power, the resources, the final say, despite any committees or councils.
Which makes the contrast with Missionary 2 even more striking.
Absolutely. Let's turn to him now, the empowerer, the facilitator.
So, Missionary 2, how did he start? What was different right from the beginning?
Dramatically different. First thing he did, basically, was ask for the usual mission grant to be stopped.
Stopped, including his own salary?
Including his salary, his teacher's salaries, the lot. He said, look, we'll only ask for funds if we have a specific need, a clear plan. And crucially, he refused to handle mission money directly himself.
Wow. That's a huge statement. Immediately changes the dynamic, doesn't it? Puts the onus elsewhere.
Completely. It's a deliberate move away from financial control, aiming to cultivate local responsibility right from the get-go.
So no direct funding, no direct control of the purse strings. What did he do instead?
He relied on a council, but this one was elected by the local churches themselves. This council became the place where needs were identified, solutions discussed, actions decided.
And he wasn't necessarily running those meetings.
Sometimes he was there, sometimes not. But the key was the impetus came from the congregation. It wasn't him saying, you need X, Y, Z. It was them saying, we think we need this.
Okay. But what if they did need outside help? Something they couldn't manage alone?
There was a process, a very structured one. The local congregation would have to formally instruct their representative to appeal to the district council.
And they couldn't just ask?
No, they had to present their case clearly, outlining exactly what they had already committed their own contribution, their effort, and then specify the amount of aid needed. Local effort was basically a prerequisite.
So built-in accountability, you have to show you're serious first.
Exactly. And then the district council, maybe even the bishop, would review it. But that local commitment was the justification for any external help. It was support, not substitution.
There's that fantastic story about the school, isn't there, that really highlights this.
Oh yeah, it's pivotal. A local church decides they want a school. Naturally, they expect the missionary too, to just sort it out for them. That's what they were used to.
And he says,
He just turns it back on them. Asks, basically, then why don't you get one? Can you imagine their surprise?
total confusion, probably.
Right. And then he pushes them further, tells them to look at their non-Christian neighbors. Heathen neighbors was the term used then, who were actually managing to educate their kids through their own community efforts.
Learn from them.
Yeah. He's essentially saying, the capacity is right here, look around you.
And that simple exchange, that question,
Yeah.
it must have shifted something.
Profoundly. You see it in their hesitant follow-up question. But may we do that? Like, do we have permission to solve our own problems?
Incredible. And his answer.
Of course. Why not? Just opening the door. Dismantling that ingrained expectation that someone else, the missionary, had to provide everything.
It really shows his core philosophy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Treat the church like it's real, like it's capable.
Exactly. He wasn't focused on just giving instructions. He was fostering unity and progress through them doing things together, figuring things out together.
Okay, what about other challenges, like dealing with people who had, say, drifted away from the church?
Mm-hmm.
How did he handle that compared to Missionary 1?
Another great example. Instead of him stepping in directly or setting up a committee he'd oversee, he brought the issue to the entire church congregation.
The whole church.
Yeah, he'd stand up, basically say, look, this is happening, people are lapsing, this is a danger to us as a community. What should we do about it?
Putting the responsibility squarely on them.
Totally. And the church responded. They appointed some of their own members to go and visit those who had lapsed, talk to them, encourage them to come back.
And did it work?
Apparently, yes. The records say most of those individuals were successfully reintegrated. It shows the power of that community-led approach, doesn't it? Peer-to-peer support and reconciliation.
Definitely more powerful than just being told off by an authority figure. What about more serious issues? There was a case with a prominent member, right?
Yes, a challenging one. A prominent church member and his son were involved in some kind of serious moral issue. Again, Missionary 2 didn't jump in and dictate the punishment.
What did he do?
He cautioned the church, warned them about the dangers of condoning the offense, making sure they understood the principles involved. But then he left the decision about what action to take entirely up to them, their collective judgment.
That takes some nerve and trust.
It really does. He believed that for any discipline to be meaningful within that community, it had to come from that community. His role was guidance on principles, alignment with broader church teaching, not judge and jury.
So what did the church decide?
They decided on public excommunication, and then the missionary guided them through the proper formal process involving the bishop.
The reaction of the person being disciplined.
Apparently, he was stunned, absolutely surprised that it was his own community, his peers, holding him accountable like this. It was so different from the old way, the top-down missionary-led discipline he might have expected.
That surprise speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how ingrained the old system was and how impactful this new community-driven accountability felt.
Immensely impactful.
And then there was the confession.
Ah, yes. Tell us about that.
The offender had to make a public confession, which was read aloud in the church service. But get this, it was also posted publicly at the city gates.
Wow. Talk about public accountability.
Exactly. It wasn't just about being right with the missionary or the bishop. It was about your standing, your relationship with your actual neighbors, your community, the people you lived with day to day.
So his guiding principle really seemed to be,
tell it to the church. Over and over again, someone comes to him with a problem. Redirected. Tell it to the church. Let the community grapple with it.
There's another story illustrating that, wasn't there? Someone facing persecution. Yes, a powerful one. A Christian man was facing some sort of persecution or injustice. His first instinct, go to the missionary for help.
Makes sense. The authority figure.
But Missionary 2, redirect him, tell it to the church. So the man presents his case to the congregation. They listen patiently, and then, collectively, they deliberate.
How did they decide?
It sounds like it was almost a silent judgment based on their intimate local knowledge of everyone involved, the situation, the context. The account even mentions the crucial insight came from an old farmer, someone described as illiterate, ignorant.
Shows the value of that local wisdom.
Absolutely. Wisdom that an outsider, even a well-meaning missionary, might completely miss or misinterpret. He recognized the community knew things he didn't.
So, over time, what did this approach do to the church itself? How did it change?
It transformed it. They started having regular discussions, not just about practical matters, but about church order, about faith, theology. They were engaging deeply.
And the missionary's role?
He intentionally stepped back more and more. And as he did, the community stepped up. They became more reliant on each other, showed much more initiative across the board.
You can see the ownership growing.
Clearly. It's that classic case of creating a vacuum that local leadership then fills. He cultivated their capacity by giving them the space and the expectation to lead.
The story about the baby is lovely too. Really shows that self-sufficiency.
Oh, it's beautiful. Some children find an abandoned baby. What happens? Does the missionary step in, maybe start thinking about needing an orphanage, fundraising?
Which missionary one might have done.
Possibly, but here, the father of one of the children just brings the baby to the church meeting, and the community itself spontaneously organizes care. They figure out who will look after the baby, how to support them financially.
Problem solved. Internally.
Yeah.
Sustainably.
Exactly. No need for a big, expensive institution run by the mission. The community had the compassion and now the structure and initiative to handle it themselves.
Even in things like charity work.
Yeah, another example. A poor widow in the community died. The church organized the funeral, collected money to help cover costs, and the missionary. He participated, contributed, but as a fellow member of the community.
Not as the chief organizer or benefactor?
Precisely. He was part of the community's effort, not the sole source of it. Reinforces that idea of shared responsibility and collective action.
It all leads up to that moment with the teacher, doesn't it? The one who worked with him.
Yes, it's such a powerful concluding observation. This local teacher, seeing all these changes unfold, asks the missionary almost incredulously, "Do you know what you are doing, sir?"
And then answers his own question.
Yes. He says, "Well, sir, if you go on like this, you will found a native church." He saw it clearly. This wasn't just a mission station being run. This was the birth of a self-governing, self-sustaining local church.
And the time frame for this transformation.
That's the kicker. According to the diary, all this significant change, this shift towards local ownership and initiative, it happened in less than 6 months.
Less than 6 months. Incredible. Really shows the potential speed of change when you unlock local agency.
It really does. Just a remarkably different outcome born from a fundamentally different approach.
Okay, so we've really unpacked these two, haven't we? Missionary one, the builder, the director, focused on control, on providing.
Impressive initial structures, but struggles with sustainability and local ownership.
And missionary two, the empowerer, the facilitator.
Yeah.
Stepping back, refusing direct control, nurturing local leadership, and problem solving.
Yeah, leading to a rapid development of a self-reliant, resilient community. A native church, as the teacher put it.
So the big questions for you, listening. When you put these side by side, which approach do you think really builds something lasting, something truly resilient?
And maybe think about parallels. Have you seen similar dynamics play out in your work, maybe, or volunteer groups, even family situations? Where does that sense of ownership, that real initiative, actually come from?
Is it something given or something that has to be taken or maybe discovered?
It really pushes us to look at our own assumptions, doesn't it? About what helping means, what leading means. Is it always about doing for people, or is it sometimes about creating the conditions for them to do for themselves?
Yeah, maybe that's the deepest dive here. Not just the history, but questioning our own models of how you build something strong. Perhaps sometimes the most powerful move a leader can make is just to get out of the way and trust the community to find its own path.